Greetings once again. It's a pleasure to be having this conversation with you. It's a pleasure to be sharing insights. Today I'm going to talk about a topic that I think it's really important we have a conversation about, and most importantly because it's fundamental to the way our society works and fundamental to the way we lead our lives as individuals, as members of the community and the society that we belong to. So over this last weekend, I had a conversation with a couple of friends. Most importantly, also watched a couple of other videos. And the subject of conversation was parental support and how do we support our parents. Parental support in the sense that you as an individual supporting your parents, supporting your guardians, who brought you up, who provided you, who provided for you, who raised you in whatever way that you can. And in that extension of that support, normally we have this conversation where it's seen as black tax because you have people who are depending on you, and therefore it's like your success is not really your success, but their success in extension through you. Which is true to an extent, but I also feel it is justified in the sense that for whoever it is that you are, there has been a societal and I would say communal responsibility and contribution to it. We are not the product of our own making, but rather the product of the making of a society where we are, where some people made sacrifices to provide for us, so made sacrifices to get us to where we are. And therefore, we owe them in one way an appreciation for that. It doesn't mean that you must give them all the money, but most importantly, you have to find a way to contribute to them. If you're spiritual, you're religious, as a Christian, we normally talk about 10% tithe to God as part of our obligation and our duty as Christians. But on the other end, where I come from in my community, parents are considered your second God. God brought you to this world, and parents actually were the vessel for that. And therefore, if you're giving God 10%, how do you fail to give something to your second part, your parents, who are your second God in that particular context? If you're not, maybe that's a different conversation and a different approach to look at it. But in a substance, when we look at it from a point of, okay, how do we extend financial support? How do we extend support to the parents that we have? When I was raised, and my conversation with my parents to a greater extent have always been about their investment in me was not because they wanted me to provide for them. Parents, at the most fundamental part, provide and invest in us to give us a better life than they had, and most importantly, to give us a means to lead our own independent and fulfilling life. When you are succeeding as an individual, your parents are happy because at the end of the day, it is the measure of success in the ability to raise you and to bring you upright, that you're able to stand on your own two feet, provide for yourself, and take care of your obligations in life at a general scope. So that is the first fundamental part. On the flip side, there are some times that you'll realize that actually your parents, when they were raising you, they had the energy, they had the resources that they could get and all that, and they invested all that in you. At the point when they aged, they might not be having the energy, might not be having the income that they need to live the life that they would wish for. And therefore, it is a way for you to say, okay, you invested in me and therefore you made that sacrifice. How can I make a sacrifice and make a commitment to support you to an extent that I'm able to give you a more decent and a better life where I can? And that is an important conversation for us to consider and look at. But ultimately, when most of the conversation come when we consider it as a burden, it is often because we look at it as an emergency and requirement that we do not want to incur. But I would say a structured approach to look at it is something that is more planned, organized, and vision in terms of a planning perspective. How do I look at it? On a monthly basis, you have your salary, whatever it is that the amount that you're looking at. Maybe put aside a provision. It doesn't have to be 10%, it doesn't have to be 5%, whatever it is. Look at it from your parents need to eat. Most likely they are living in their own house. If they're in the village, if they're in the city, different conversation because you're looking at rent provisions and all that. In my case, my parents live in the village and therefore they have their own home and everything is there. So the only provision is they get their meals, they get some kind of finances for any other expenses that they might want to incur. So you can look at that budget and say, okay, on a monthly basis, they would need such an amount to figure, which they need to be provided for. So how do I structure my finances to get that provision already there as a kind of a standing order if possible? Or if not a standing order, channeling it into a different account and kind of I would say a holding account, so that in case that kind of provision has to come in place, I'm able to sort it out. So that is a key thing that you need to look at. How do I budget for it? And another thing we look at is you look at it at a personal and individual level. Most of the times when we're raised, we come up in big families, we brought up in big families and all that. It is the point where you can have conversation with your siblings, the people that you grew up with and all that, and ask them, how do we communally contribute to the well-being of our parents and share that responsibility? It stops being a burden, but it becomes an opportunity for you to actually come together as a family and do something together. in this particular context, it would be about, okay, you've done a budget, you know what they would need for their well-being and all that, and therefore that money gets distributed. It doesn't have to be equally to everybody, because we are all different. Even the fingers of our hands are different in size and all that, because we have different capabilities. But looking at it from a point of, I am contributing what is within my means, and also contributing it not as a burden, not as an obligation, but rather as an appreciation to the parents or the people who brought me up, and therefore I owe it to them to give them something. If we would structure our support to our parents in a structured way, in the sense that, one, we know what would be expected of them in terms of having the life they would wish for, and also what we want to give them. On the other end, contributing from a point of an appreciation rather than obligation. And most importantly, not leaving it to one individual of the family because we consider them, they have the money. It is not about what you have, it's about what you value, that support that they accorded you, and how much you value your parents, and therefore you're willing to contribute to them, and giving that provision in that line, saying, on a monthly basis, I'll be giving 1,000 shillings, I'll be giving 5,000, I'll be giving 10,000. And you structure it in your finances so that at the start of the month or at the end of the month, you have it locked that you know, in the next month, however much I'll be making, this is not within my purview for my own use. It is for the parents who invested in me, and therefore that money is already carved out. It becomes an issue when you have to actually talk about and look at that money in a subsequent level, when you've already had other commitments and you're like, okay, now my budget is being strained extremely strenuously. But if you plan for it up front and it's not even part of your budgeting cycle for the money that you're receiving, it doesn't look more like a problem, but more of a relief, but also a responsibility and a duty of care. And it gives you pride in relating with your parents, because you know, I'm doing my part in helping them have a better life because they invested in me to get to where I am. That is an important flip side that we can look at it. And the conversation that we talk about black tax and all that, we are all a product of the society and the community. We are who we are because somebody invested in us, and we owe it to them to invest in them in whichever way that we can, but doing it in an intentional way, in a conscious and a responsible manner, but most importantly, without the feeling of those who have should do more and those who don't have should do less because we're in communities, but rather giving based on our means and our capabilities, and supporting where we can. You can't, if you yourself, you're living in an apartment somewhere in the city, wherever it is that you're paying for, you're making, let's say, for example, 50,000 shillings per month. You're not going to provide your parents 100,000, 200,000. It's beyond your means, and they also understand that. Support them from within your means and acknowledge that that is the best you can give them. They don't want to live in the mansions in Runda and all that. They need the best that they can get based on what your means are and what you're capable of giving them at that particular moment. Let's make peace with that, and let us be kinder and more conscious of the investment our parents put in us, but also use it as a way to pay back and support them in whatever it is that they can, as they're still alive with us in this lifetime. Thank you, and if you enjoyed this conversation, subscribe to the channel, share it with somebody who might find it valuable, and let us build a conscious and socially responsible society. Thank you.